Okay, so I'm currently working on the bilge here, and what I'd like to do first before I finish up the engine, paint it and such, and paint the bilge, is to address the stuffing box here. Now I was planning to go with one of those newer dripless type PSS or the Volvo type, but I think I might just stick with the traditional flax or Teflon, whatever the new stuff is that they use. Basically a rope that gets stuffed in there, keep it from leaking when the engine's not running, and even then you only get a few drips when the engine is running. So I have disconnected the drive shaft from the engine there with these 4 very rusty bolts, but I was able to soak them in PB Blaster for several days. Trying to remove this drive shaft coupling. It's rusted on, so what I did was I decided to just cut it off. These aren't that expensive anyway, and this is pretty rusty. So what, the puller would not come off. It would not come off with a puller, so I took a grinding wheel, cut a slot here almost to the shaft. Same thing on the other side, and then tapped it a little, and it's already starting to move. So now I'm going to hit it with the puller again, and I think it should come off. And that's it. It should come off. There it is. Slotted on both sides, but not so deep that it hit the shaft, so I think that worked out well. I'm trying to get the Cutlass bearing out. There are no set screws on the side, which is not surprising because this is pretty thick fiberglass. I tried pounding it from the inside of the stern tube to no avail. Wasn't sure if this is actually epoxied in, but I believe it's just a friction fit. So I've slotted it with a hacksaw blade here, and now trying to peel it away with this chisel that's too big. But I'll keep at it, and hopefully this stern tube won't be too mangled. See how it goes. 1 hour later, I've cut several slots and have been peeling it back, the bearing that is. And notice the bearing's actually starting to slide back into the tube. So now I'm going to try pounding it from the inside. Hopefully it'll move, since it seems to be sliding. And pounding it from the inside, I've got a pipe here, which is obviously smaller than the stern tube but bigger than the bearing. I've just been pounding on that. Well, that didn't work. Guess my pipe was too small diameter, because it basically just pushed out the rubber part of the bearing and came through. Have to figure something else out.
A few moments later.
And there we have it. Success at last. And the solution here was to put a socket that better fit in the hole without hitting the rubber, and then the pipe would just hit against it. And I was able to clean it up. There's a lot of gouges right here towards the edge and a little slot right here only on the edge, but otherwise it was fine. I just used like a half round file, take out some of the gouge, the high spots, and then very lightly went over it with 320 sandpaper, glued to a socket Again, very lightly. I didn't take off much material because this is an interference fit. And looking at the remains of the bearing here, you know that it's 4 inches long, so 1.37 inches. I've received the parts that I need for the next stage here. Here we have the bearing, Cutlass bearing from Duramax, Johnson, whatever it is. This particular size is called the bait bearing. Okay, so I've put the bearing in the freezer overnight, actually for a couple days. Heated up the stern tube here, and then put the bearing in, tapped it in with a rubber mallet, and it did go in up to about an inch remaining. So I just got a threaded rod, 3/4, some washers, and some nuts. Same thing on the other side, on the inside. Now I'm going to tighten this up, and hopefully it'll go in without too much trouble. Well, that seems to have worked.